My name is Ruth, and I am going to tell you something I have never told anyone outside my own kitchen table. I am 71 years old. I have lived my whole life in a small Amish community, and for 43 years I was married to a man named Eli. I loved that man the way you love the ground you stand on, without questioning it, without even really seeing it, because it was simply always there. And then he died, and at his funeral, standing in the doorway of the very barn where we had said our vows, was a woman I had never seen before in my life, holding the hand of a boy who had my husband's exact eyes. Before I tell you what happened that day, I want to ask you for something. If you are watching this, please press that like button right now, because it costs you nothing and it tells me that somebody out there is listening to an old woman's story. And I would love it so much if you subscribed, so you don't miss what I have to share next, because there is more to tell than I could ever fit into one telling. And here is what I really want. I want you to write in the comments where you are watching this from. I have never left my county, not once in 71 years, and it would warm my heart something powerful to see all the faraway places where my little story has traveled. So go on, type it in. Tell me your town, your country, wherever you are sitting right now, listening to an old Amish woman talk about the biggest secret of her life. Now let me start from the beginning, because you deserve to understand who I was before I tell you how it all came undone. I was born in the same valley I still live in today, on a dairy farm that had been in my family for 4 generations. My father was a stern man, but fair, and my mother was the kind of woman who could quiet a crying baby, calm a spooked horse, and can 40 jars of green beans all in the same afternoon without ever raising her voice. I was the 4th of 9 children, which meant I learned early how to disappear into a crowd, how to be useful without being noticed, how to want things quietly, because there was never enough attention to go around for wanting things loudly. I tell you this because I think it explains something about why I did not see what I did not see. All those years with Eli, I was raised to accept what was given to me and not ask too many questions about what I was not given. That is not a complaint against my parents, mind you. That was simply the way of things then, and in many ways it still is. I met Eli Yoder at a hymn sing when I was 17 years old. He was 19, tall, with dark hair that never quite laid flat no matter how he combed it, and a way of looking at you like you were the only person in the room. Even in a room full of 40 young people, crowded around long tables singing the old German hymns, I did not think much of him that first night. He seemed a little too sure of himself for my taste, a little too quick with a joke. But he found a way to walk me home that night, holding a lantern between us. And by the time we reached my father's gate, I had already decided, in the private way a young girl decides such things, that I would marry him one day. It took 2 years of courting before he asked me properly. We wrote letters back and forth even though we lived only 4 miles apart, because that was how young people did their courting then. You did not simply walk up and declare yourself. You circled around it slowly, through paper and ink, through Sunday visits, through the careful choreography of who sat where at the supper table. His letters were sweet, but plain. He was not a man of many flowery words. He wrote about the weather, about a horse he was training, about how he had thought of me while mending a fence. I kept every single one of those letters, and I still have them, tied with a blue ribbon in a box under my bed. I read them again after he died. I will tell you what I found written between the lines of some of them a little later in this story, because at the time I read them as a young girl, I did not understand what I was looking at. But an old woman reads differently than a young one does. We married when I was 19, and he was 21. In November, the traditional wedding month for our people, after the harvest was in, and before the deep cold of winter set in. It was a beautiful day, cold and clear, and there were over 300 people at the wedding. Because that is how it is done. The whole church district comes, and you feed them all. And the women cook for days beforehand. Roast chicken and mashed potatoes and creamed celery, which is a tradition specific to weddings in our community. I wore a blue dress that my mother and I had sewn together, and Eli wore a black suit with a white shirt. And when the bishop pronounced us married, Eli looked at me and smiled in a way that made me forget every single person in that barn except him. We settled on a small farm not far from where I grew up, a wedding gift partly from his family, and partly bought with money he had saved from years of carpentry work. Eli was gifted with his hands. He could build anything: furniture, barns, wagon wheels, cabinets so fine that English customers would drive 2 hours just to commission a piece from him. This talent of his would become important to this story later, so I want you to remember it. My husband was a craftsman, and craftsmen sometimes need to travel to sell their work, and that simple, honest fact became the crack in the door that let in everything that came after. In our first years of marriage, we had what I believed was an ordinary, good life. We had our first child, a daughter we named Sarah, when I was 20 years old. Then came Daniel, then Miriam, then 2 more after that. 5 children in all, born over the course of about 11 years. Eli worked his farm in the mornings and his carpentry shop in the afternoons, and some weeks he would travel to sell furniture at auctions or to fulfill orders for English customers who lived a good distance away. At first, these trips were short, a day, sometimes 2. He would come home smelling of sawdust and road dust, tired but cheerful, and he would bring the children little trinkets: a peppermint stick, a small carved animal he'd whittled on the road. I did not think anything of it. Many Amish craftsmen traveled for their trade. It was simply part of the rhythm of our life. But as the years went on, the trips grew longer. What had been a day or 2 became 3 days, then a week, then sometimes 2 weeks at a stretch. He told me business was growing, that English customers up north wanted his work, that there was a whole community of buyers in a county nearly 150 miles from us who kept him busy. I remember asking him once, maybe 8 or 9 years into our marriage, whether it might not be easier to simply take fewer orders, to stay closer to home. He got a strange look on his face then, one I did not understand at the time, but that I think back on often now. It was not anger exactly. It was more like, and I only understand this now, all these years later, it was the look of a man who is standing at the edge of 2 different lives and does not know how to explain to one that the other exists. He told me the money was too good to turn down, that he was doing it for our family, for our children's futures, and I believed him. Because why would I not believe him? He had never given me a single reason in 9 years of marriage to think otherwise. I want to pause here and tell you something about how trust works in a marriage like ours. In the Amish way of life, especially in the more traditional communities like the one I was raised in, a wife does not typically question her husband's business dealings. That is not because we are simple or foolish. I want to be very clear about that, because I know some of you watching may have ideas about Amish women that are not quite right. It is because our life is built on a foundation of division of labor and trust that goes back generations. The husband tends to the farm and the trade and the money. The wife tends to the home, the children, the garden, the canning, the sewing. These are not lesser roles, either one, but it does mean that a husband who wishes to hide something from his wife has an easier road than he might in other kinds of marriages, because a wife like me was raised not to ask about ledgers, not to ask about where exactly the money went, not to ask too closely about a trip's particulars. I gave Eli that trust because it was how I was raised to give it, and because, in every other way, he seemed to earn it. He was a good father when he was home. I want you to understand that too, because this is not a story about a monster, not entirely, though I have had days, especially in that first year after his death, when I called him worse than that in the privacy of my own kitchen. But he was tender with our children. He built each of them a wooden toy with their name carved into the bottom. He sat with them at devotions every evening he was home and read from the Bible in his low, steady voice. He held my hand under the supper table sometimes when he thought no one was looking. He was, by every measure I had to judge him with, a devoted husband and father. That is what makes what I am about to tell you so very hard to hold in my two hands even now. The trips continued for the rest of our marriage, for over 30 years, if you want the truth of it, though I did not learn until later just how long this arrangement of his had been going on. He would leave, sometimes with almost no warning, saying an English customer needed a piece finished, or that there was an auction he had to attend, or that a supplier up north had lumber he needed to inspect himself. I raised our 5 children largely on my own during those stretches. I milked the cows. I fed the animals. I disciplined the children when they misbehaved and comforted them when they cried, and taught them their letters and their prayers, mostly by myself, while my husband was somewhere I believed to be about the honest business of a traveling craftsman. Now, I want to tell you about the small things, because when I look back now, knowing what I know, I can see them lined up like stones across a creek, a whole path of evidence that I simply walked right past for over 30 years, because a happy woman does not go looking for reasons to doubt her husband. There was the matter of the second set of good clothes he kept in a chest in his shop, rather than in our bedroom closet, which he explained by saying he liked to change before meeting customers, so he would not smell of sawdust, and that it was simply more convenient to keep them there. There was the matter of a small tin box he kept locked, which he told me held nothing but his business receipts and a bit of cash for the road, and which I never once asked to see the inside of, because why would a wife demand to see her husband's business receipts? There was the matter of letters that came for him sometimes, addressed in a woman's careful handwriting, which he told me were from a long-time English customer's wife who handled her husband's furniture orders because her husband could not write well. And I believed this too, because it was a perfectly reasonable thing to believe. There was the matter of a birthday. Every year, without fail, in the 3rd week of March, Eli would announce that he needed to leave for a trip, sometimes for as long as 10 days, right around the time of his own birthday, which fell on the 22nd of March. I used to tease him gently about it, that he ran off every year right when I wanted to bake him a cake, and he would laugh and say that business simply worked out that way, that it was always his busiest season up north. I did not think much of this pattern until much, much later, when I understood exactly why my husband could never seem to be home for his own birthday, not once, in 43 years of marriage. There was the matter of the horse. About 15 years into our marriage, Eli began keeping a second horse and buggy at a boarding stable 2 counties over, rather than driving his own horse the full distance each time. He explained this as being easier on the animal, which made sense to me since it was a long journey, and a good farmer does not run his horse into the ground. I did not think to ask why he needed a second full setup of harness and buggy, rather than simply switching horses partway, the way some traveling tradesmen did with arrangements among friends. I did not think to ask a great many things, because a wife who loves her husband and has 5 children to raise does not spend her days constructing theories about what he might be hiding. She spends her days living her life. There was the matter of money, too, though this one I only understood the shape of after his death. Eli was by all appearances a modestly successful craftsman. We were never wealthy, but we were comfortable. We never went hungry. Our children were clothed and shod. We could afford a doctor when one of the little ones took sick. But there were years, I remember now, when the money seemed tighter than his workload should have accounted for. Years when he would tell me business was slow even as he continued to leave for these long trips, as though the trips themselves were not bringing in what they should have. At the time, I simply tightened my own belt further, as a farm wife learns to do, canning a little more, sewing patches instead of buying new fabric, and did not question where the difference was going. I understand now. Half of what my husband earned all those years was not going toward our household at all. It was going 200 miles north to a woman and children I did not know existed. I want to tell you now about the day Eli got sick, because that is where this story truly begins to turn. It was early spring, about 2 years ago now, when Eli started complaining of pains in his stomach that would not go away. At first, we treated it the way we treated most ailments, with home remedies, with rest, with prayer. But when he began losing weight rapidly and his skin took on a yellowish color, I insisted, for the first time in our marriage, that he see an English doctor, and he did not fight me on it, which frightened me more than anything else, because Eli was not a man who gave in easily. The doctor's news was not good. Cancer in his pancreas already spread by the time they found it. The English doctor spoke gently, but plainly, the way doctors have to when there is not much time left to waste on soft words. He gave my husband perhaps 4 to 6 months. Eli lived 5 months and 11 days after that diagnosis. I nursed him myself, in our own bedroom the way our people do, with help from my daughters and from women in our church district, who brought food and sat with me through the long nights so I could sleep a few hours at a time. Those months were, in many ways, the closest Eli and I had been in years, because his other life, whatever it was, whatever it had been, had to fall away as his body failed him. He could not travel anymore. He could not leave. For the first time in over 30 years, my husband was entirely mine, every single day, for 5 months. I have wondered so many times since then whether he thought, during those months, about telling me the truth. Whether there were nights when he opened his mouth to confess and then closed it again, deciding, perhaps, that it would be crueler to unburden himself onto a dying man's guilt than to simply let me grieve him whole. I will never know the answer to that. He never told me. He died on a Tuesday morning in October, with me holding one of his hands and our daughter Sarah holding the other, and his last words, spoken so quietly I had to lean close to hear them, were, "Take care of them." Ruth, I believed in that moment, and for weeks afterward, that he meant our 5 children. I understand now that he most likely meant something far larger than that, something I would not learn the true shape of until the day we buried him. Now, before I tell you about the funeral, I want to remind you, if this story is touching you at all, even a little, please take just 1 second and hit that subscribe button and drop a like on this video. It genuinely means so much to me, an old woman with a story she waited a long time to tell, to know that people out there are listening. And please, in the comments, tell me where in the world you are watching from. I read every single one. My granddaughter helps me look at them on her telephone, and it brings me such joy to picture all these different places where my story has landed. Now, let me tell you about the day of the funeral, because that is the day everything I believed about my life came apart in my 2 hands like a piece of wet paper. In our community, funerals happen quickly, typically within 2 or 3 days of a death, and the whole church district comes together to prepare. There is a viewing at the home, and then the funeral service itself, which in Eli's case was held in the largest barn belonging to a family in our district. The same barn, in fact, where we had once been married 43 years before. I remember standing in that barn on the morning of Eli's funeral, looking up at the same rafters I had looked up at as a 19-year-old bride, and thinking that I had come full circle in the worst possible way, that the building which had once held the beginning of my life with this man now held its ending. The service began the way our funerals always do, with the ministers speaking of the shortness of life, of the certainty of judgment, of the hope of resurrection. I sat in the front row with my 5 children around me, my hands folded in my lap, doing my best to hold myself together the way a good Amish widow is expected to, with quiet dignity rather than loud weeping. I had cried plenty already, in private, in the days since his death. This day was for burying him properly, not for falling apart in front of 300 people. About halfway through the second sermon, I noticed a small commotion near the back doors of the barn, the kind of stir that ripples through a crowd when someone unexpected arrives somewhere. I did not turn around. It would have been improper to crane my neck during a funeral sermon, but I felt it, the way you feel weather changing before you see the clouds. I assumed it was simply a latecomer, perhaps a family arriving from a farther district, and I turned my attention back to the minister. It was only after the service ended, as the men were preparing to carry the coffin out to the burial ground behind the barn, that I finally saw her. She was standing near the back, an Amish woman, plainly dressed in the same manner as any of us, perhaps 10 years younger than myself, with graying hair pulled back under her prayer covering, and a face that was, in that moment, doing something I recognized instantly and with a cold drop in my stomach, because it was the exact same thing my own face was doing. She was grieving. Not the polite, respectful grief of a distant acquaintance come to pay respects. She was grieving the way I was grieving. Deeply. Personally. The grief of a wife. Beside her stood 2 young people, a young man who looked to be perhaps in his late 20s, and a younger boy of maybe 14 or 15. And when my eyes fell on that boy's face, my whole body went cold. Colder than I have ever felt in my life. Colder than any Pennsylvania winter. Because that boy had my husband's eyes. Not eyes that reminded me a little of Eli's eyes exactly, set into a stranger's young face. The same deep brown, the same slight downturn at the corners that Eli had, that our own son Daniel had inherited too. I stood there in the aisle of that barn, my husband's coffin being carried past me toward the burial ground, and I looked at a boy I had never seen before in my life, and understood, before a single word was spoken, that my marriage had not been what I believed it to be. I did not approach her that day. I want you to understand that. I did not march across that barn and demand answers over my husband's own coffin. Whatever else I am, I was raised to have some sense of what a moment calls for, and that moment called for burying my husband, not for confrontation. I finished the service. I stood at the graveside. I received the condolences of neighbors and cousins and old friends, all the while feeling as though I were watching myself do these things from somewhere just outside my own body, the way you watch someone else in a dream. But I did not lose sight of that woman. I watched her from across the burial ground as the men lowered the coffin. I watched her weep, quietly, with her hand pressed to her mouth, the same posture of grief I had used myself not an hour before. I watched the older young man put his arm around her shoulders, comfort her the way a son comforts a mother. And when the burial was finished, and people began to disperse toward the house where the funeral meal was being served, I watched her turn away from the crowd, take the hands of her 2 children, and walk toward a hired car waiting at the edge of the property. Not a buggy, mind you, a car, driven by an English driver, which told me she had come from far away, farther than any buggy could easily travel. I could have let her go. Part of me, a large part if I am honest with you, wanted nothing more than to let that car drive away and pretend I had never seen what I saw, to bury my husband and my confusion together and go on with the only life I knew how to live. But something in me, some strength I did not know I still had after 5 months of nursing a dying man and 1 day of burying him, made my feet move faster than I intended, made my voice call out across that yard in a way that was entirely unlike me. Because I am not, by nature, a woman who makes scenes. "Wait," I called. "Please, wait just a moment." She turned, and when she saw me walking toward her, something passed over her face. Not surprise. I noticed even then not surprise at all. But something closer to resignation. The look of a person who has been waiting a long time for a conversation she dreaded, and is not sorry, exactly, that it has finally arrived. "You're Ruth," she said before I had even reached her. Not a question. A statement. She knew my name. She had known my name, I would come to understand, for a very long time. "Yes," I said. My voice came out steadier than I felt. "And you are?" She hesitated only a moment. "Miriam," she said. "Miriam Yoder." I want you to sit with that for a moment the way I had to sit with it, standing in that yard in my black funeral dress, because I want you to understand the particular cruelty of that detail. Yoder. She was Miriam Yoder. My husband had not simply kept a mistress somewhere, some arrangement he was ashamed of and hid away in a locked box of secrets. He had married her. He had taken vows with her, under our faith, in a community I had never even heard of, and given her his name, my name, the name I had worn proudly for 43 years, the name carved onto the headstone we had just placed over his grave. And more than that, I had a daughter named Miriam, my 3rd child, and this woman, this stranger, shared that same name, which struck me at the time as such an odd, sick little detail of a life I could not begin to make sense of. I did not faint, though there have been days since when I wish I had, because fainting might have been an easier thing to do with that particular moment than simply standing upright and continuing to breathe. Instead, I asked her, in a voice that did not sound like my own, "How long?" She understood the question without me having to explain it further. 28 years, she said quietly. "We married 28 years ago this coming spring. 28 years. I did the arithmetic without meaning to, the way your mind does math on its own sometimes even when you would rather it didn't. That meant Eli had begun his 2nd marriage, his 2nd life, when we ourselves had been married for 15 years, when our own children were young, when Sarah was still learning her letters and Daniel was barely out of diapers. 28 years of trips. 28 years of that locked tin box, and the 2nd set of clothes kept in the shop, and the birthday he could never seem to celebrate at home, because, as I understood now, with a horror that still sits in my chest to this day, the 22nd of March was very likely also his wedding anniversary with her, or close enough to it, that he simply could not risk being in 2 places on the same important date, and had chosen, every single year for 28 years, to be with her, instead of with me. I asked her more that day, standing in that yard with the English driver, waiting patiently by his car, and my own children no doubt wondering where I had gotten to. She told me they lived in a settlement almost 200 miles north, in a different state altogether, a smaller and more remote Amish community than my own. She told me Eli had told her people there that his business kept him traveling south often, to a district near where I actually lived, which was, in its own twisted way, not even entirely a lie, merely a lie of omission stretched thin enough to cover 2 entire households. She told me she had 2 children with him, the young man I had seen, whose name was Aaron, and who was 26 years old, and the boy with Eli's eyes, whose name was Joseph, and who was 15. 2 children. I had 5. 7 children total, fathered by one man living what I can only describe now as 2 full, complete, entirely separate lives, running parallel to each other for nearly 3 decades without ever once crossing, until the moment his death forced them together in a barnyard over his own grave. I asked her the question that I think anyone in my position would have asked, though I am almost ashamed of how desperately I needed the answer. I asked her if she had known about me. She looked at me for a long moment before she answered, and I could see her weighing something, deciding how much truth to give an old grieving woman she had just met. "Not at first," she finally said. "Not for years. I believed when we married that I was his only wife, his only family. I did not learn about you and your children until almost 10 years into our own marriage, when I found papers in his coat pocket that did not add up to the story he had told me." She paused. I confronted him. I nearly left him then, but he begged me to stay, told me he could not simply abandon 5 children who depended on him, that he loved us both in different ways he could not fully explain even to himself. And God forgive me, Ruth, I stayed. I believed I had no better options, with 2 young children of my own by then. And I stayed, and I let him keep living the way he was living. And I am so sorry. I am so terribly sorry that this is how you had to learn the truth. I did not know, standing there, whether to feel angry at this woman or something closer to a strange, terrible kinship with her. Because in that moment I understood that she and I had both been deceived by the same man. That we were not truly rivals so much as 2 women who had separately given their entire lives to a person who had never given either of us the whole of himself in return. That understanding did not arrive all at once, I want to be honest with you. In that first conversation in the yard, I mostly felt rage. A rage so large I did not know my own body could contain it. Rage that made my hands shake and my voice crack and my vision blur at the edges. But underneath the rage, even then, there was something else beginning, some seed of recognition that would take root over the months that followed. She gave me her address before she left that day, written on a scrap of paper torn from a small notebook she kept in her bag, and she told me, with what seemed like real sincerity, that she would understand completely if I never wanted to see or speak to her again, but that the offer would remain open if I ever wanted to talk further, or if I wanted to meet my... And here, she paused, searching for the right word, before settling on it, my other stepchildren, though of course they were not truly stepchildren to me at all. They were simply my husband's other children, born of another marriage he had no right to enter into. I went home that night to a house full of my own grieving children and grandchildren, who had gathered for the funeral meal and the days of visiting that follow a death in our community, and I said nothing to any of them about what I had learned. I want you to understand how strange that felt, to sit at my own supper table, surrounded by people I loved and who loved me, carrying a secret so enormous I did not know how to begin setting it down. served the food. I accepted condolences. I went to bed that night in the same room where I had nursed my husband through his final illness, and I lay awake until the birds began to sing, staring at the ceiling, trying to understand how 43 years of marriage could contain a lie so large I had never once glimpsed its true shape. If you are still with me, thank you. I know this is a hard story to sit through, and I promise you it gets harder before it gets any easier. But I truly believe there is something worth learning in it, and I would be so grateful if you would like this video and subscribe to hear the rest of what happened, because there is quite a lot more to tell. About what I found when I finally opened that locked tin box. About the conversation I eventually had with my own children. About the day I met young Joseph properly. And about what happened when the bishop and the ministers of both church districts learned the truth of what my husband had done. And please, don't forget to tell me in the comments where you're watching from. It gives an old woman like me such comfort knowing my story is being heard in so many different corners of the world. I want to go back for a moment before I tell you what happened in the weeks after the funeral, because there are a few more of those small stones across the creek that I think about often now. Little moments from our marriage that I have turned over and over in my mind since learning the truth, looking at them now with different eyes than I had at the time. I remember once, perhaps 20 years into our marriage, our son Daniel came down with a terrible fever in the middle of winter, high enough that we feared for his life for 2 full days and nights. I sent word to Eli through a driver we sometimes hired, a message meant to reach him at the address he had given me for the English customer he claimed to be staying near on that particular trip. It took him 4 days to come home, which he explained by saying the roads were bad and the driver could not reach him quickly. And by the time he arrived, Daniel's fever had already broken and the crisis had passed. I remember feeling, at the time, a small hurt that he had not come faster, but I told myself that a man cannot always control the weather or the roads, and I set the hurt aside, the way I set aside so many small hurts over the years. I understand now, having pieced together the true geography of his second life, that the address he had given me likely was not even close to where he actually was, and that the 4 days it took him to return probably had far more to do with disentangling himself from one household and traveling the true distance from the other than it had to do with any trouble on the roads. I remember too the year our daughter Sarah was baptized into the church, a significant and joyful occasion in our community, one that Eli nearly missed entirely, arriving on the very morning of the ceremony, dusty and tired, claiming he had misjudged how long his business would take. I remember the relief I felt when his buggy finally came up the lane, relief that he had made it in time, relief I did not examine closely enough to wonder why a father would cut something so important so close to the edge in the first place. I know now, of course, that he was almost certainly balancing 2 calendars in his head at all times, 2 sets of important dates, 2 families each believing themselves to be the whole of his devotion, and that the closeness of his arrival that day was not misjudgment at all, but simply the arithmetic of a man trying to be fully present in 2 places that were 200 miles apart. There was also, and this one troubles me more than almost any other memory, a stretch of about 8 months, roughly 22 years into our marriage, when Eli seemed unusually withdrawn and sorrowful even while he was home with us. He lost weight during that period, seemed distracted at meals, sat up late some nights staring into the fire rather than coming to bed. I asked him more than once what was troubling him, and he always waved the question away, telling me it was nothing. Business worries, nothing for me to fret over. I have since learned through careful and gentle conversation with Miriam, that this was very likely the period during which her own father passed away, a loss that hit their household hard, and that Eli had been grieving alongside her and her children in his other life while presenting to me, in this life, only the thin, unexplained residue of a sorrow he could not properly share with the family who did not know there was anything to grieve. I find this particular memory almost unbearably sad now, sadder in some ways than the anger I felt at first, because it shows me a man genuinely suffering, genuinely needing comfort, and choosing, out of the impossible position he had built for himself, to suffer that grief in isolation from me, rather than risk revealing why he was grieving at all. I share these particular memories with you not to excuse him, because I do not believe any of them excuse what he did, but because I think it is important for you to understand how a lie like this one survives for so long. It does not survive through some singular grand deception. It survives through 1,000 small, ordinary moments, explained away one at a time, each one reasonable enough on its own to believe, until decades have passed, and an entire second life has been built and sustained in the gaps between the explanations. I did not sleep for nearly a week after that funeral. I moved through my days doing the things a widow is expected to do, receiving visitors, writing thank you notes for the food and flowers, beginning the slow work of sorting through my husband's belongings, but my mind was elsewhere entirely, circling that scrap of paper with Miriam's address on it, circling the image of that boy's face with my husband's eyes set into it, circling 28 years of a lie I had never once suspected. About 10 days after the funeral, I finally worked up the courage to open the locked tin box that Eli had always kept in his shop. The one he told me held nothing but business receipts. I found the key easily enough. It had been on his key ring the whole time, hidden in plain sight among the ordinary keys to the shop and the buggy shed, because why would I ever have thought to try it in that particular lock? I sat on the floor of his workshop, surrounded by the smell of sawdust and linseed oil that had always meant Eli to me, and I opened that box with hands that would not quite stop shaking. What I found inside confirmed everything Miriam had told me and revealed a good deal more besides. There were photographs. Amish families do not typically photograph themselves, as you may know, since it goes against our understanding of humility and the commandment against graven images. But apparently Eli's other community was somewhat less strict about this. Or perhaps he had simply broken that rule too, along with every other one, because there were several small photographs of Miriam and the two children at various ages, a family portrait of sorts, the kind of thing a man keeps to remember faces when he is far from them. There were letters, dozens of them, tied together with string. Letters in Miriam's handwriting spanning what appeared to be the better part of 3 decades. Letters that spoke of ordinary domestic matters, a sick child, a good harvest, a new baby, that could have been written by any wife to any husband, except that they were written to my husband by another wife entirely. There was also a ledger, a small business ledger that at first I thought truly was just receipts, until I sat with it long enough to understand its real pattern. It showed money coming in from his carpentry work and money going out in 2 separate streams, one marked simply with an R, which I understood after some time to mean me, Ruth, our household, and one marked with an M, for Miriam, her household. He had, for nearly 3 decades, been carefully dividing his earnings between 2 families, keeping meticulous records of it the way any honest businessman keeps his books, as though the sheer act of careful accounting might somehow make an entirely dishonest arrangement into something orderly and respectable. I found, too, A marriage certificate. I want to tell you about this particular document because it disturbed me more than almost anything else in that box. It was a certificate from the church district up north, recording the marriage of Eli Yoder to Miriam Miller, dated some 28 years prior, signed by a bishop I had never heard of, in a settlement I did not know existed until the day of my husband's funeral. Seeing his signature on that document, the same signature I had seen on our own marriage certificate decades before, the same hand that had signed both documents with what I imagine was the exact same steady confidence, undid something in me that I am not sure has ever fully been put back together, even now. I sat on that workshop floor for hours, going through every scrap of paper in that box, piecing together a timeline of my husband's second life, with the same careful attention I would have once given to piecing together a quilt. What emerged was this. Eli had met Miriam on one of his early business trips, back when our own children were small. Back when I believed those trips to be nothing more than what they appeared to be on the surface. Something had happened between them. Attraction, loneliness, opportunity. I will never fully know which, and perhaps it does not matter now which it was. And rather than choosing one life or the other, rather than ending things with me and starting fresh with her, or ending things with her before they had properly begun, my husband had chosen instead to build both, carefully, deliberately, over years, maintaining 2 households, 2 wives, 2 sets of children, separated by 200 miles and by a network of lies so intricate that neither Miriam nor I had ever glimpsed the other's existence until the day death finally collapsed the whole structure at once. I want to tell you something about how I felt in the weeks that followed this discovery, because I think it is important, and because I suspect some of you watching may have your own version of this kind of betrayal to carry, even if the particulars are different from mine. I felt, first and most powerfully, an anger that frightened me with its intensity. I am not a woman who is given to fits of temper. Our way of life does not encourage it, and my own temperament has never much inclined toward it either. But in those weeks I found myself doing things I had never done before. I threw one of his carved wooden tools across the workshop hard enough to crack its handle. I wept until I made myself sick. I said things out loud, alone in that empty shop, that I would be ashamed to repeat to you now. Curses and accusations flung at a man who could no longer hear them or answer for them. Underneath the anger, though, was something even harder to carry, which was grief upon grief. I had already been grieving my husband, mourning the good man I believed him to be, and now I found myself grieving a second time, grieving the marriage I thought I had, which turned out never to have fully existed in the way I understood it. It is a strange and lonely kind of mourning, to lose a person twice, once to death, and once to the revelation that the life you shared with them was not entirely real. I do not know how to fully explain this feeling to someone who has not lived it, except to say that grief is hard enough when you know exactly what and who you have lost, and it becomes a different, more disorienting kind of pain when you are no longer certain what you actually had in the first place. I did eventually tell my children. I want to walk you through that conversation, because it was one of the hardest of my life, harder in some ways than the funeral itself. I gathered all 5 of them at my kitchen table on a Sunday evening about 3 weeks after Eli's death. Sarah, Daniel, Miriam, and my 2 younger children whom I have not yet named for you, my son Leafy and my youngest daughter Anna. I made coffee, the way I always do when there is difficult news to deliver, because it gives your hands something to do while your mouth says the hard things. I told them everything. I told them about the woman at the funeral, about the boy with their father's eyes, about the tin box and the ledger and the marriage certificate. I watched their faces move through the same stages I had already moved through myself. Disbelief first, then a kind of stunned silence, then for some of them, anger, and for others, something closer to a strange numbness, as though the news was too large to feel all at once and needed to be taken in slowly, over days, in smaller pieces. My son Daniel, who had always been closest to his father, took the news the hardest. He left the table without finishing his coffee and did not speak to me again for nearly 2 days. When he finally did come back to talk, he told me he felt as though he had lost his father twice over, once to death, and once to the discovery that the man he had spent his whole life admiring had been living a lie so enormous it called into question every memory Daniel had of him. Was any of it real, Mem? He asked me. Mem is what our children call their mothers. Was any single day of it real? Or was he only ever performing being our father in between trips to go be someone else's father instead? I did not have a good answer for him then, and if I am honest with you, I am still not entirely certain I have one now, though I have come to believe something a little more hopeful than I did in that first raw conversation, and I will share that with you before this story ends. My daughter Sarah, my eldest, took a more practical approach, which is very like her. She has always been the one among my children most inclined to solve a problem, rather than simply feel it. She wanted to know what this meant legally, what it meant for the farm, for any inheritance, whether this other family might have some claim on what Eli left behind. These were fair and necessary questions, and in time we did have to work through them, with help from an English lawyer familiar with matters of estates, though I will spare you most of those details, since inheritance law is not, I suspect, why you are watching a video about an old Amish woman's broken heart. My daughter Miriam, not his other one, struggled the most, I think, with the strange coincidence of names, with the fact that her father's other daughter, or rather her father's other wife, shared her own name. She told me it made her feel almost erased somehow, as though there were a shadow version of her own family existing somewhere she had never known about, mirroring pieces of her own life back at her in ways that felt deeply unsettling. I understood this feeling better than I could explain to her at the time, because I had felt something similar myself, standing in that yard, hearing a stranger introduce herself with my daughter's very name. My younger two, Levi and Anna, who had been small children during many of their father's most frequent traveling years, found themselves wondering, with a kind of aching curiosity, whether their father had perhaps loved his other children more, whether he had been more present, more attentive, in that other household during the very years he had been most absent from ours. I could not answer this question for them either, not with any certainty, though I have since learned enough from my later conversations with Miriam to believe the truth is sadder and more complicated than either simple explanation. I do not believe Eli loved one family more than the other. I believe, and this took me a very long time to arrive at, that he loved both, in whatever broken and dishonest way he was capable of loving, and that the tragedy of his life, and of the lives he damaged in living it, was not a failure of love so much as a catastrophic failure of honesty and courage. A man who truly could not choose between two lives, and who lacked the strength to end one properly, is not a man who loved either family well, no matter how much affection he may have genuinely felt in the moment for each of us. Now, I promised you I would tell you about meeting young Joseph properly, and about what happened when the leadership of both church districts learned the truth. So let me continue on. And again, if you are finding any value in this story at all, please do take just a moment to like this video and subscribe and leave me a comment telling me where you are watching from. It truly means the world to an old woman telling her story for what may be the only time in her life. About 2 months after the funeral, I wrote a letter to Miriam. I had thought about it for weeks before I finally sat down to do it, uncertain whether I wanted any further contact with this woman at all, uncertain whether reaching out to her would feel like healing or like reopening a wound that had only just begun to scab over. In the end, I decided I could not simply let the matter rest in silence. There were questions I still needed answered, and there was, if I am honest, some part of me that felt drawn to her in a way I did not fully understand. Some sense that she was the only other living person who could truly comprehend the particular shape of what I had lost, because she had lost the very same thing, in her own way, on her own side of the lie. She wrote back within 2 weeks. A long letter, careful and thoughtful, answering questions I had asked and anticipating others I had not yet thought to ask. She told me more about her own courtship with Eli, about how he had presented himself to her people as a widower. A widower, if you can imagine that. He had told her entire community that his first wife had died, that he was raising children on his own in a district too far to easily visit, which was, I suppose, his way of explaining his frequent absences from her without ever having to reveal that his first wife was not only alive, but entirely unaware that she had been declared dead for the purposes of a stranger's convenience. Learning this particular detail was, I confess, one of the more difficult moments of the whole ordeal for me, because it meant that somewhere, in a community 200 miles from my own, people had spent decades believing me dead, offering their condolences to my husband over a death that never happened, welcoming him into a second marriage built on the specific and calculated lie of my own supposed grave. Miriam wrote that she had grown suspicious over the years, especially after she found those papers a decade into their marriage that revealed the truth. But that Eli had been, in her words, a masterful explainer, always able to construct some story that smoothed over her doubts, at least enough to let her continue believing what she wanted to believe. I recognized this description immediately, because it matched my own experience of him so closely. He was, I have come to understand since his death, an extraordinarily gifted liar, not in the sense of enjoying deception for its own sake, but in the sense that he seemed to genuinely believe, in the moment he was telling each of us his stories, that what he was saying was some kind of necessary truth, a truth required to keep both households, both families, both versions of his life intact and functioning. I do not think he saw himself as a villain. I think, and this may be the strangest and hardest thing of all to accept, he may have believed himself to be doing his best by everyone involved, even as he systematically deceived every single person who loved him. I did eventually agree to meet Joseph, the younger boy, properly. This meeting happened about 4 months after the funeral, at a small diner in a town roughly halfway between my community and theirs. A neutral meeting ground suggested by Miriam, so that neither of us would have to travel the full distance alone into unfamiliar territory. I brought my daughter Anna with me for support. Miriam brought Joseph, though her older son Aaron chose not to come, telling his mother, as she later relayed to me, that he was not yet ready to sit across a table from the family that had, in some sense, been stealing his father away from him for his entire life. A sentiment I understood completely, since my own children had expressed very similar feelings about the idea of meeting their father's other family. Joseph was, in that meeting, a quiet, watchful boy, 15 years old, still raw with his own grief, and I found myself, somewhat to my own surprise, feeling a fierce protectiveness toward him almost immediately, despite every reason I might have had to resent his very existence. He was, after all, not responsible for any of the choices his father had made. He was simply a boy who had lost his father, the same as my own children had, and who was now, on top of that grief, being asked to somehow make sense of a whole invisible family he had never known existed, until a stranger's face appeared at his father's funeral, wearing black, weeping in the exact way his own mother wept. We did not talk about the largest, hardest questions in that first meeting. There would be time for that later, over the months that followed, as our two families slowly, carefully, built something like a relationship out of the wreckage Eli had left behind. In that first meeting, we mostly just looked at each other, this boy and I, taking the measure of one another, two people connected by a man we had both loved and lost, and in different ways been betrayed by. The matter of the church leadership took longer to unfold, and was, in its own way, one of the more painful chapters of this whole story, because it meant the private shame of my marriage became, necessarily, a matter of community knowledge and community judgment. Our bishop, a good and serious man who has known my family for decades, came to visit me not long after word of the situation began to spread through our district, as such things inevitably do in a close community. He was gentle with me. I want to say that clearly. He did not treat me as though I bore any blame in the matter, but there were still difficult conversations to be had about how the church would regard Eli's memory, about whether some formal acknowledgement needed to be made to the congregation, about how the two church districts, mine and Miriam's, ought to communicate with one another regarding a member who had, in effect, committed a serious sin against both communities simultaneously by entering into a marriage the second church had no way of knowing was bigamous. I will not walk you through every detail of those discussions, because much of it was procedural, the kind of church business that would not much interest you. But I will tell you that in the end, both districts came to treat the matter with a kind of solemn compassion, understanding that Eli's sin was his own, and that neither Miriam nor I, nor any of our children, ought to bear the shame of it ourselves. This was, I think, exactly the right way for our community to handle it, and I remain grateful for the wisdom our ministers showed in a situation that could easily have been handled with far more harshness and far less grace. I want to tell you now about where things stand today, because I know you have been patient with me through a very long and very sad story, and I think you deserve to know that it does not end entirely in sorrow. It has been a little over 2 years since Eli died, since I learned the truth about the two families he built and maintained across 200 miles and nearly 3 decades of deception. I would be lying to you if I said the anger has fully faded. There are still days, more than I would like to admit, when I find myself furious all over again. When some small memory surfaces, some object of his I come across while cleaning, some story I remember him telling that I now understand was almost certainly a piece of the elaborate cover he maintained for so long, and the rage comes back as fresh and hot as it was in those very first weeks. Grief, I have learned in my old age, does not move in a straight line. It circles back on you when you least expect it, and I have stopped trying to rush myself through it or shame myself for still feeling it so strongly, even now. But something else has grown alongside that anger, something I did not expect and would not have believed possible in those first raw weeks after the funeral. Miriam and I have become, in a strange and unlikely way, something like friends. We write letters regularly now. She has visited my community twice, and I have visited hers 3 times, meeting her extended family, sitting at her table, coming to understand the particular shape of the life Eli built with her in the same way she has come to understand the shape of the life he built with me. We do not speak often of him directly anymore. There is only so much use in circling that particular wound over and over. But we speak of our children, our grandchildren, our gardens, our churches, the small daily matters that make up a life. And I have found unexpectedly a companionship with this woman that I did not know I needed until I had it. Our children, too, have slowly begun building relationships with one another, though it has taken time and has not been without its difficulties. Aaron, Miriam's older son, did eventually agree to meet my children, nearly a year after the funeral, and while their relationship remains somewhat guarded, they have found common ground in the shared strangeness of their situation, in being able to talk to one another about their father, in a way that people outside this unusual family simply cannot understand. Young Joseph has grown particularly close with my son Levi, who is only a few years older than him, and the two of them write letters to each other regularly, and have visited back and forth several times. I have found myself, in my old age, with 2 more grandchildren than I ever expected to have, born of a situation I never would have chosen. And yet there they are, real children who did nothing wrong, who deserve love and family the same as any child does. And I have decided, in the time I have left on this earth, that I would rather extend that love than withhold it out of a resentment that was never truly theirs to carry. I think often about what I would say to Eli if I could speak to him one more time. I do not know that I have fully forgiven him. I am not sure forgiveness is even the right word for what I feel, or whether it is a thing I owe him at all, but I have come to a kind of peace, an uneasy peace, but a real one, with the fact that my husband was a deeply flawed man who did a great wrong to nearly everyone who loved him, and that this wrong does not erase the genuine tenderness he showed our children, the genuine skill and care he put into his craft, the genuine moments of happiness we shared across 43 years of marriage. Both things are true at once, and learning to hold both truths together without letting one cancel out the other has been the hardest and most important work of my grief. If there is a lesson in all of this, and I have thought long and hard about what lesson I might offer you, it is perhaps this, that even the person you know best in all the world, the person you have shared your bed and your children and your whole life with, can hold rooms inside themselves that you never once see the door to. I do not say this to make you suspicious of the people you love. Suspicion is a heavy, corrosive thing to carry, and I do not wish it on anyone. I say it only because I think there is a kind of humility in accepting that we can never fully know another human heart, not even the heart of a spouse we have loved for over 4 decades, and that this uncertainty, frightening as it is, does not have to destroy us. It very nearly destroyed me. But I am still here, 71 years old, tending my garden, writing letters to a woman who was once my husband's other wife, welcoming grandchildren I never expected into my home, and finding, against every reasonable expectation, that there is still a great deal of goodness left to be lived, even after the worst kind of betrayal a marriage can hold. I want to share one more memory with you before I close, because I think it captures something about where my heart has finally settled, even after everything I have told you. Last spring, about 1.5 years after Eli's death, Miriam and I decided, together, to visit his grave. It was her idea, actually, which surprised me when she first suggested it in one of her letters. She wrote that she wanted to see the place where he was buried, to stand there once, to say whatever it was she needed to say to a man who could no longer answer her. I agreed to go with her, and I brought Anna, and Miriam brought young Joseph, and the 4 of us drove out together to that quiet burial ground behind the barn where I had married Eli, and, decades later, buried him. It was a strange thing, standing at that graveside with the woman who had shared my husband without either of us knowing it, both of us quiet for a long while, the spring wind moving through the grass around the headstones. Joseph asked if he could say something, and Miriam nodded, and the boy knelt down by the stone and spoke quietly, in our language, words I will not repeat to you because I think they belonged only to him and his father. Whatever kind of father Eli had managed to be to him across the miles. When he finished, he stood and came and took my hand, this boy with my husband's exact eyes, and he said, "Thank you for not hating me." I did not know, in that moment, how to answer him properly, so I simply held his hand and told him there was nothing in him to hate, that he was a good boy who deserved better than the confusion his father had left behind for all of us to sort through, and that I was glad, despite everything, that I had come to know him. We stood there a good while longer, the 4 of us, and eventually Miriam spoke, not to me exactly, but out toward the stone itself, and she said something I have thought about many times since. She said, "I hope, wherever you are, you finally understand what you cost us both." I did not add anything to that. I did not need to. It said everything that needed saying, plainly and without cruelty, which is, I think, exactly the kind of honesty Eli himself was never quite able to manage while he lived. I tell you this story, this particular graveside afternoon, because I think it shows something important about grief and betrayal both, which is that they do not have to end in bitterness, even when bitterness would be entirely justified. I could have spent whatever years I have left in this life hating that man, hating Miriam, hating the whole tangled mess he left behind for 2 families to untangle without him. There were months when I very nearly did choose that path, when the anger felt like the only honest response available to me. But I have come to believe, in my old age, that there is a difference between honesty about what was done to you and a permanent residence inside your own rage about it. And I have chosen, as much as I am able, not to live permanently in that second place, because I do not believe it is where God intends any of us to stay for good. My days now look much as they did before, in most of the small ways that matter. I rise early. I tend my garden, which grows a little wilder each year now that I have no husband to keep the fences mended, though my son Levi comes by most weeks to help with the heavier work. I sew. I cook for my children and grandchildren when they visit, which is often, since word of this whole strange story spread quietly through our family and drew them closer to me rather than further away, as I had feared it might. I write my letters to Miriam, and occasionally to Joseph directly now, since the boy has taken a liking to corresponding with an old woman he once had every reason to resent. I sit in church on Sunday mornings and I still believe, as strongly as I ever have, in the faith I was raised in, though I understand now that even a faith practiced faithfully for a whole lifetime does not protect any of us from the particular damage another person's choices can do to our lives. If you have listened this whole way through, I thank you, truly, from the bottom of my heart, and I want to leave you with this thought before I go. Whatever secret you may be carrying, whatever betrayal you may have suffered, or perhaps whatever secret you yourself may be keeping from someone who loves you, I would ask you to consider the cost of it, the real cost, the kind of cost that outlives you and lands squarely on the people left behind to sort through the wreckage. My husband was not a cruel man in the ordinary sense of that word. He never raised his hand to me or to our children. He never spoke an unkind word that I can recall. And yet the quiet, patient, decades-long dishonesty he practiced did more damage to more people than any single act of cruelty could have managed in a moment. That is the lesson I keep coming back to. The one I most want you to carry away from this story. That the lies we tell to protect ourselves from difficult conversations are so rarely kindnesses, no matter how they may feel in the moment we choose them, and so often turn out, years later, to be the cruelest thing we ever do to the people who loved us and trusted us with the whole truth of who we were. Thank you for staying with me through this whole story. It has taken me a long time to work up the courage to share it, and I would not have done it at all if I did not believe there might be someone out there who needed to hear it. Perhaps someone carrying their own secret. Perhaps someone who has discovered their own version of a hidden life. Perhaps simply someone who needed to be reminded that it is possible to survive even the deepest betrayal and find your way to something like peace on the other side of it. If this story meant something to you, please, I ask you one more time, hit that like button, subscribe so you do not miss whatever I choose to share next, and leave me a comment telling me where in this wide world you are watching from. It genuinely brings such joy to an old woman's heart to know her story has traveled so far beyond the borders of the little valley where she has spent her whole life. Take care of yourselves, and take care of the people you love, and be gentle with them. And with yourselves, because none of us ever know the whole of what another person is carrying. God bless you, and thank you for listening to an old Amish woman's story.